don't
go with
need it.
You don't need the plant, but you don't need the
I
plant.
like the plant. Okay.
That's all right.
It
Like now,
oxygenates the room.
now
Keeps
the
you healthy.
magic has gone.
I'm
Now
sorry.
people,
You're going to be having like an existential crisis the whole time.
yeah, exactly.
It's
Now,
all
now
my
people
fault.
will know what's here on
It's
usually.
his emotional support plant.
Exactly. I have no support bubble. I just have my plant on my desk. Oh, come on.
I've got enough planned for both of us, V. So don't
Yeah,
worry.
thank you. Well, anyway, hi everybody. Are we live? Then?
Yeah, we're live.
We are.
Just to
So-
give a bit of context, like Michael asked me where's my plant, the moment Mike hit the button live. So anyway,
So anyway, this week we're talking about Hollywood and non-Hollywood music. So I guess as a sort of general overview of the topic, what we thought would be really interesting about this is, especially when all of us were kind of getting into film music and going into school, it seemed like, I think was kind of on the cusp of when we were always told sort of like, at least from my experience, go to LA, if you want to make it in film music, and that's where everything is. And it was sort of this push, like, go to Hollywood if you want to be involved in it. And nowadays, from a lot of Hollywood composers who say that it is no longer a place. Hollywood is really mostly made up of just the studios, and now they operate sort of all over the world. So it's not necessarily true that you have to be in LA and that you have to be a part of that. But I think beyond that, we also want to just touch on how vast the world of film music and sort of adjacent to film music is, outside of just doing Hollywood stuff. That the most composers who are successful in earning a living don't have anything to do with Hollywood. Just because there's so much other media that gets made and needs music for it.
as a matter of fact, I think some of the most pardon, some of the most interesting composers that have been working in Hollywood recently, in the recent years in general, are musicians and composers and like producers who were doing their own thing wherever they were in the world, and then they got noticed by some producers, by some directors, by whoever it may have been, and they got noticed for their music, their stuff, and just these producers and directors thought, oh, it would be cool to put that on a film. And just think of Johan Johansson, just think of even just like the oh my god, I always forget their names, the guys who did the music for Stranger Things. They're not like full music composers, they're just like synth guys basically.
Well, it's definitely the trend now, isn't it? That like agencies and film producers and filmmakers in general are looking for artists to give their film an individuality. And like 30 years ago, you wouldn't see that. It was, you just kind of had, or very rarely, you'd have someone that's, trained under an apprenticeship and knows how to score a film. It seemed to be, that was the way. And now I guess probably is symptomatic of, how easy it is to share your music. Even from obscurity, you can become kind of easily accessible to people. I think that's probably why. But anyway, we'll talk about this.
Yeah, I think also because there's, seems to always be, I think of it like a pendulum that kind of goes back and forth every 10 or more years, between kind of getting a system and wanting sort of like a system of efficiency to deliver a project. And, sort of arguably you could look at that's kind of what remote control and sort of what Hans Zimmer delivers. And there's so many sort of Hans sound-alikes, and it's not necessarily the composer's fault. It's this is what people are asking for. And I think then, eventually that gets kind of tired out and they want anything that isn't that. And they just want, give me something unique. I want some unique voice. And I feel like we're definitely in a transition back towards that where it's really valuable to be an individual. And to have a really unique voice for a project. And that's probably why guys like Michael Stein and I forget the name of his collaborator for Stranger Things,
Kyle Dixon, something like that.
That's
Yeah.
it, yeah.
You know, that they would get called for something like that because it's like, okay, we've got this, you know, really interesting project coming up. We want something totally unique to go with it. You're the guys for it. Rather than going to a film composer agency and saying, you know, can you get a bunch of different composers who can do kind of a bunch of different things, pitch for this and see what we get. They, you know, we want a specialist. These guys do exactly this kind of music.
Well, that was it. I think is that they were specialists, wasn't it? It's more, you know, as almost an exception that they were creating things with the right kind of sound for something where it was about pure 80s nostalgia. And they were just the perfect fit for it. Whereas I guess other artists maybe have their own very, you know, unique sound, and the filmmakers is kind of cherry picking who they think will be coolest.
So tonight, some things we want to go through. We've thought of a bunch of examples of kind of Hollywood-ish and non-Hollywood projects that we want to kind of play through and discuss. But we definitely want to invite anybody watching to share some different tracks that you think would fit along the lines, or, you know, sort of what are some of your favorite non-Hollywood projects that you'd love to share with us, and we can bring that in and play some of that back too.
And if whoever is sending us link, if you want to tell us a little bit about this project, why you think is relevant. By the way, I think it would be interesting even to check out some actually Hollywood like music, so some stuff that has been produced in Hollywood, to have sort of like a counter argument. So in general, feel free to send us material and to give your feedback, give us your feedback, your opinion on this matter.
Yeah. So why don't we jump right in with, so this is an example that Sam wanted to bring with the title to Secession, and the composer is Nicholas Britell. So why don't we just play, this is a short one, so we can just play through the whole thing, and then maybe Sam, you can lead us off on that.
Cool.
Very cool.
So yeah, I chose this. Has anyone seen this? Anyone seen this
but
show?
I've been told it's amazing, so I
Me
need
too.
to watch it.
I've not seen it either, but I chose it because a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's HBO, and when we were talking about, when we were discussing what we're going to talk about tonight, my immediate thought was HBO, and the reason is because perhaps the Americans amongst us know a bit more about this when HBO was less of a thing internationally, as it has now become. I guess it's always been pretty big, but of late they've become pretty synonymous with high quality TV shows and perhaps bigger budget TV shows, well-made cinematic TV shows that are afforded pretty big soundtracks as well. Game of Thrones being an obvious example. So that's one reason I wanted to choose this as a sort of avenue of perhaps high quality TV projects. I also chose it because of Nicholas Britell, who I think traverses between film and TV and indie film, bigger film and TV, but all the while has a particular voice and is, a particularly interesting composer. I think he's come up since this more, I guess, diversification of the quality of whatever filmmaking it is, whether it be in theatrical cinematic release or TV shows. The quality seems to be being met by the TV side of things, and he seems to do both really well. So yeah, that's why I chose this one, even though I've not seen it. I've heard great things.
Just musically, I think that track is really, really cool. It's got like a kind of a big beat or like hip hop vibe, but it's going through the medium of like orchestral piano concerto kind of feeling. And I loved what he did with the strings, where they're playing in about the middle of the track. It feels almost like they're only just barely playing it. Like it's got that kind of frenetic energy to it that is really captures a kind of vibe really well.
It's a bit out of tune at one point. I think it's very deliberately stressed.
I tried to say it in a more diplomatic way, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's very deliberate, because what I know about the show, it's about kind of family tensions in a essentially very rich family that are feuding over power of the family company, I believe. So it kind of makes sense. And I think in the rest of the soundtrack as well, he does similar things where it's kind of got a neoclassical feel in that sense, where it's kind of hybrid. It's got classical skeleton, but then he messes it up basically.
What's the name of the show again?
Succession. I don't know how old. I think it's a couple of years old now, but yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I think we've got some good comments about it too. Lar Jones says replays it the main title twice every time listening to it. It is a really cool track, and I think something that I think is sort of stylistic of Nicholas Britell, which Sam, you were sort of mentioning just before we started, like he's kind of this crossover, someone who's done a lot of these smaller indie projects, and he brings over his sort of chamber string writing is really present. And I think that's what also gives it that really sort of like fragile, side to the sound. But I think that's, kind of because he's had to work maybe on a smaller scale or be more creative with less resources. And then it's kind of, added to that toolbox to let him bring that into a much bigger project.
And I also felt like, the fragility and intimacy of the chamber strings was like completely juxtaposed with like the massive 808 sub and the gigantic drums, and everything is compressed so hard that it sounds a little bit like pop music. It sounds like a hip hop track.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's nice that that's there, because there is a I hesitate to say Netflix syndrome of skipping titles. And so a lot of titles music suffers as a result, but this is something you want to listen to, and it's catchy, and it's got that hook. And I think it was symptomatic of this Netflix thing of being able to skip the intro, skip the credits. A lot of intro music is actually not that great. I don't know if you've ever made sure you don't skip the intro and listen, but I don't know, things like I don't want to name anything, but there's a lot of programs on Netflix in particular, I think, where the opening titles is like the weakest bit of music that person's written, and actually it's the meat and potatoes score that sings a lot better.
I wonder if the actual score is in a similar style, or you guys haven't seen it, right?
I've not seen it, but I listened to some of it, and it's definitely got a similar feel to it, a bit more classical in places, classical inspired, I should say. Yeah, it's worth listening to for sure. But yeah, I just think he's great. Like he's done, he did like Moonlight with Barry Jenkins. I think he does Barry Jenkins' films, and what was the other one? Oh yeah, he did The King, which I don't know if you've seen. It's really good. I really liked it. I don't know.
I liked the film, and I liked the music as well.
Laura Frank has also suggested Vice. Maybe we could have a quick listen to that as well.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
also Nicholas Bertel.
Let's go for it.
Let me just cue this up a bit, and let's see if I get any ads that I should skip. Yeah. So bear with me just a sec. Cool. That's a really cool example. Thanks
that.
for
Really nice
suggesting,
cue.
Lara.
So what's interesting? I just had a quick look. I mean, that is. We could probably all agree that is a Hollywood film. It's released by MGM, and was had a big release. So that's kind of a counterpart, and you can see there's a size there in what he's able to write for, maybe, but it's just really well written music. I love that.
It's just proper string writing.
Yeah.
And I think kind of one theme that we were discussing with this is just how sort of like, what does Hollywood mean anymore? I think when we think of Hollywood films, it's probably, or like sort of blockbusters, it's probably synonymous with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or, Bond or Mission Impossible or something like that. And, you get those massive, massive projects, but I think it's almost kind of like, Netflix has become a major studio, but Netflix also has, sort of scale to that. So there's some projects that they really invest in, they get all these big named actors for, and then they also buy smaller indie films and release them, or they produce smaller films on a smaller budget. So kind of case by case, you might get something that is a ton of money thrown at it, or you get something that, is a much smaller budget and ends up having a bit more creative freedom. And then I think similarly, you'll see that kind of with some of these bigger studios now, because they'll have kind of smaller arms, or maybe they bought up a smaller production company that's producing sort of like they're the kind of indie doc arm of MGM or something like that. So I think it's just quite interesting kind of how everything is sort of, blends together now.
Well, I think what's just kind of going back to what you said initially there, I mean, it is kind of an old term now to say, Hollywood film, because of course it used to mean like in one studio production, based in Hollywood. So it's all on the lot. The composer worked there, all of this stuff, which isn't really what happens anymore. And I think or rather, certainly the composer working there is pretty rare. But just kind of going back to what you said earlier, Mike, about Hans Zimmer, I think it was you, as an example, the kind of maybe 15, 20 years ago trend was what he set off, wasn't it? Where he was kind of providing that Hollywood efficiency and size to everything he could, and it's still kind of is still happening, right? He's still got pretty much a monopoly, but the reaction to that was another branch, I think, was what we were talking about before, which was the sort of more artists in their own right, having a career doing their own thing and then being cherry picked. I think that's why that's happened, and I guess we're hearing both of those tonight.
Yeah, we've got a few more good examples from Darren. Darren mentioned Euphoria. So this is scored by Labyrinth, who's primarily a producer. And I think we can definitely have a look at that. Darren also mentions The Queen's Gambit, which was also on Sam's list for tonight.
Have you seen it, V? Have you seen it?
I just binged the out of it, and
it's good.
Really,
it's good, right?
Really good.
I think I'm in love with Anya Taylor-Joy.
I've been in love since she did The Witch a few years ago. Have you seen that film?
Of course I've seen it. We're rambling, V. Let's talk about it later.
He's been a long time Instagram follower.
Don't get me started.
So, okay, I'm going to play Euphoria.
Although, sorry, can it
in a moment.
Just to wrap sort of what Darren was saying up. It ties in with what we were saying. Netflix is by now such a major studio that I don't know. I feel it's kind of in a weird position. Shall we really consider it non-Hollywood music? I mean, it has such gigantic budgets and projects that like working for Netflix is pretty much as glorious as working for. Don't you think so, Sam?
I know it doesn't always. Well, let's not get into it.
Well, but I think that's kind of the point, is that it has both, and I think that is maybe in part why some of the other studios have also invested in, maybe smaller budget things, because, they're trying to compete kind of on all levels. Like Netflix owns, sort of dominates so many different sides of the markets. So it's kind of like you get these big ones that they throw money at, but it's definitely not all of them. And even Disney, I can attest from a recent pitch that I was going up for that there was just very, very little money involved, and it was quite a bit of music to deliver. And, you think like, I mean, this is Disney, one of the biggest companies in the world. And, so I think it really is case by case.
Yeah, but the pandemic and then the
yeah.
By the way, just a little
Mickey
shout
Mouse
out.
is suffering.
Can I just give a little shout out? We got Mari Sanyo on YouTube.
Mari!
Hello, Mari.
Hi, Mari.
Yes, Mari did the course with us at RCM and has been doing really well. Everyone should check out Mari's music as well as Kevin's. We've got a reunion tonight.
Oh, is Kevin there as well? Hi, Kevin.
Yeah.
He is.
Should we look at... Let's play Euphoria, and then we've got some other great comments coming in here too.
That's really cool.
That's very good. I've just realised what it's from. It's the one that Zendaya got nominated for, I think, or maybe even won awards for. Anyway, sorry, but yeah, actress.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just.
She was a singer, so.
No. Well, I don't think it's her, but I assume it's Labyrinth.
That is very cool, and there's a lot of very interesting stuff that like composers for media are doing with singers and vocalists. I think I don't know if we're gonna listen to some of it later, but Arrival was a name that we kind of like highlighted when we were talking among ourselves, and like what Johan Johansson did there. I think it's very interesting. Like there's a whole, I think, current of like collaborations between composers and performers, vocalists, singers, and it's always amazing what like the results what they can create.
Yeah, I definitely feel like this one in the production is very pop influenced again, and it's if you keep your ears out, there's so many opportunities to use pop sensibilities in music, because I guess it's popular and it's familiar to a lot of people, so they can quickly latch onto it. I think it's a less honed tool in the composer's arsenal, but a good one.
Yeah,
I think also.
Sorry, well, I thought it was really interesting just listening. I think this is the first time I've heard this, and it's like, you know, what's clear is asking a producer to come up with the main titles, you know, kind of like starting from scratch. Like there isn't the template of what a typical main titles should be, the way it should be structured and the way it should sound or anything like that. And it's instead like it sounds very honest, that it's kind of like, okay, I've got this idea. Maybe it started just from a vocal riff and then they're just kind of playing it up. And, you know, and it ends up being something that's really cool. That's a bit more unexpected.
Yeah, the production is amazing as well. I loved how the vocals and the piano was super compressed and drenched in reverb as the vocals, but the beat was super dry and in your face, the snaps as well. It was really cool.
I think as well, just from what I know, which is little granted, about the show, it's got a kind of, you know, dramatically it makes sense as well. I mean, it sounds fitting to the show about this sort of troubled girl, and yeah, I think in that sense it's good as well.
Yeah, we've got some other good comments. We have Jolene, who's one of the first-year student at RCM, and she's asking kind of about Japanese anime, either like the studio projects or TV series, which is great because we also have Kevin in the chat.
Kevin!
We have a resident expert,
Yeah, write quite a lot of anime music, and will be joining us as a guest on, I believe, December 2nd. But in a few weeks' time, we're going to have Kevin on as a feature to talk a lot about his projects. But I think it's a great one to bring up because this is something kind of where we're planning on heading as well, kind of towards games and that side of things, is that what I think is really interesting about mostly from what I've heard from Kevin and kind of his experiences in anime is just the structure of how you would write a series is completely different, and that they're often kind of hiring you to create like a bespoke music library. And you can hear this in most anime series that the same tracks will be used from episode to episode. And it's a different way of working, and it's also you know, I think it's kind of comes from a different need that's totally outside of Hollywood. And there's so much like cult followed music that comes out of all of that, and again has nothing to do with Hollywood. And I think that's really exciting. I'm a genuine fan of Kevin's music myself, and I think what he gets to do with those things, as you'll see in a few weeks' time, we'll talk about it. But you know, I think it just affords a lot of opportunities for creativity. What are your guys' thoughts on it?
Well, I'm not as educated as I'd like to be, and maybe this is a bit of an antiquated opinion, but for me, my favorite like anime film composer would be Joe Hisashi for the Studio Ghibli films. I mean, it's a bit of an obvious one, and that is almost like Hollywood-esque as far as Japanese anime music goes. But yeah, I think he's an amazing composer, and I love the type of orchestral colors he uses, being very influenced by, you know, Debussy or Romantic era composers. It's got a kind of old but also new feeling to it. So he'd be one of my favorite.
I was going to say, just from a viable career point of view, as an alternative to Hollywood composer. I mean, Kevin can probably tell us more about this when we have him on, but if that's the case, that the majority of the music for that arena is essentially library music, essentially original tracks that are then edited, then you've got a far more involved music editor, and it's something that could interest people, working as a music editor, taking someone else's music and making it work. It's a whole different ball game, but and can be very creative as well. But yeah, I guess that's what my immediate reaction to that.
I just wanted to say that if people haven't, they should listen to Florence by Kevin Penkin, which is not anime, of course. It's a game, but it's really great music, and I really recommend it.
Yeah. I remember, Kevin, when you were showing me like, oh, I'm working on this mobile game. It's kind of in beta. And then like a month later, I opened the App Store and it was #1 app in the App Store. Sort of heading towards games, I think this is a great segue to pick one of Michael's tracks that he suggested for tonight, which is from a game called Ori and the Blind Forest. I remember, I think, Shane, you suggested this to me after you were saying how you and Michael both fangirl over it. And I also love Shane. It. So
now I assume Michael will have posted from the second game. Is that right, Michael?
I actually included from both the first and the second game, because there are two very different orchestras that were used from the first to the second game, partially due to the success of the first game and the fact they were able to record with a massive orchestra and air for the second one, as opposed to Nashville with a relatively conservative amount of players. So the first two tracks that I posted in the group are from the first game, and then the third one is from the second game.
Should we, I think that's a great comparison too. Should we maybe pick like the first and third and we'll just play a little of each?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, let me again see if I can avoid ads.
Oh, that's literally right before the best part. Can we finish the track? Is like 30 seconds longer.
Okay, I won't begrudge you it.
Oh my god, that was...
Worth going back for.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, my heart would have died had you not finished that.
There's something about it that really, and it's not just like the wind instruments on top of the orchestra, but there's something about it that really feels like How to Train Your Dragon.
I was going to say it's got a John Powell
It
feel
really
about it.
has that kind of feel.
I think it's
doesn't it?
probably that they're both inspired by like certain folk music traditions, and it's
Yeah.
kind of they're both coming back from that.
Yeah, but even
but
in
the-
terms of like composition and like the way it progresses, the way the melody I think is written. There's something about it, I don't know.
And the production as well is a kind of polished folk feeling about it. It's like it's glossy, but it has that folk.
I think it's really nice the fact that these solo instruments sit really nicely on top of the orchestra as well.
Yeah.
They're very much at the forefront. I think there's also something to be said about bass movement as well. The bass movement that he uses compared with John Powell. I guess if we're thinking about contrapuntally, the top line and the bottom line, their relation to one another is very similar in terms of how they move about. Whereas the middle stuff is a lot of just texture, and that's the palette that everything else is sort of sitting on top of and then, moving underneath.
Lara Jones mentioned that watching it, the music made all of us just smile and sway.
Yeah.
Something to that.
I could listen to it all day, man. I mean, that's lovely. That's just-
One little thing that I kind of heard again listening this time was the use of the like synth textures in there is really nice because they blend so well with the orchestra, and you're almost like, oh, is this some kind of like fancy metal idiophone that I've never heard before? Oh no, it's a synth, but it kind of like blends right in there with everything else.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe the gloss that I was hearing the first time.
It's also very like treble frequency heavy. It's got that kind of brightness to it that really works in the context of the game, especially visually. It's very bright and colorful.
But interestingly enough, this is how it relates from game 1 to 2, because I think that's a sonic difference from the room they recorded in and the recording style compared with the second one. So the first one was recorded in Nashville with an orchestra, and then they had a lot of solo instruments they layered on top that were recorded individually. And then the second one was recorded in air with a massive orchestra, and the sound is just... it's a lot deeper in this one. I think they were afforded a lot more money for this one just based on how well the first Ori did. But the second one is glorious, and it just takes those themes and those colors and just it goes much deeper with it.
Should we play a bit of the music from the second one now?
Yeah, should be the Luma Pools.
What do you recommend? Because it's a 5-minute track. What should I sort of highlight?
Why don't you try a little bit of the beginning, maybe the first minute, and then we can skip to halfway through.
Okay. I'll just jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
It's good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that was recorded in Air.
Yeah, that was recorded in Air. I think I can't remember when the actual game came out. I know it came out for Switch earlier this year, and I blazed through it. So I think they recorded it earlier this year before the pandemic hit. But yeah, it's
this YouTube video is in March 9th, so they probably hit like right before the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. It's so good. I love all the different colors that he used. I remember reading an article about the first Ori, which was really nice. So the game studios is called Moon Studios, and I think this was their game. And I think they're based in Austria somewhere, but they work remotely with lots of people around the world. And I think the idea behind that is to really get the best collaborators, so you don't necessarily have to be locally working. So they all work pretty remotely. And I think Gareth, who wrote the music, Gareth Coker, initially wrote it to concept art almost, because they had to pitch it to Microsoft initially. And I think the idea behind using all those different ethnic instruments. I mean, have any of you guys played the game? No. Shane has, but okay, you all have to get on it, and everybody in the chat has to get on it as well. It's very good. But the idea was obviously using instruments that reflected sort of the atmosphere. So, for example, there's a called, I think it's the Ginzo tree in the first film, not the first film, the first game. And so it was using a lot of wood instruments, utilizing things that would reflect the surroundings. The game design itself is really, really beautiful. And it really lends itself to a lot of gorgeous melodic and textural writing. And I think it really comes across, and especially the second game as well. They did a lot more with, I think, the visual depth of things. So that's also reflected in the music. It's amazing score. Just listening through, it's great that you're able to enjoy it just as an audio only experience, but in the context of the game, it works so well. And which is surprising as well, just because how intricate the music is. And obviously with game audio, there's an interactive element, and it somehow has to loop back on itself, and then it has to respond to your inputs to the game. And it was just amazing how they made it all work, and just how solidly it was composed, and just the music itself is glorious. So
I guess in the sort of the game world, there's that added responsibility of like being really part of the world building, collaboration, because you've really got to, you're in that world for so long as a player that you've got to really get completely absorbed, and the music has to be absolutely one with that. Not to say that isn't the case with film, but it's less of a consideration. I think it's it's much more about being part of the world that you're playing in, and particularly for this game, it sounds like it's a really integral part of it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting as well, just to see the role of the music change in relation to, film in the game as well. Because I'd argue that in the context of this game, the music plays a bigger role than it necessarily would in a film. Whereas in a film, it's more about atmosphere. Whereas it's atmosphere plus a little something extra, especially during the really intense action sequences. It is the identity of the game as much as the characters are, as much as the art design is, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think that brings a good point too, that I think like writing for games, games have always kind of been outside of Hollywood. I think only maybe more recently, or with like these major sort of title releases with Sony or something like that, is it essentially kind of people who probably produced film for 30 years are cross over into games at that level, and it might be a sort of similar experience, but I think games, like it is a completely different experience, and music serves a different function, and I think that's so appealing too. It's like you just mentioned, Michael, it's not like you're there in the kind of background. And I think if we look at like there's that beautiful the video by Every Frame a Painting that rips apart the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the whatever his title is, Marvel Orchestral Universe or something in it. But it's, talking about how essentially they have to play it really safe, and that music is just this wallpaper that's not really adding anything to a scene.
Is it the one they go around asking people what's the theme from Captain America? What's the theme?
Yeah.
People only remember the Avengers theme.
Yeah.
Barely.
And I think, you know, it's like that's what I think is really exciting about games, in that, you know, you are an integral part of that. And there's like themes and tunes and things like that that just get stuck in my head and make me feel like I'm kind of in that environment. I mean, some amazing scores that I've come across recently are for, like, Horizon Zero Dawn is a game that I just ripped through this year. And then I just ripped through Ghosts of Tsushima as well. And both of those are just amazing. They're awesome scores, and you also get the chance to work on a big project for sometimes a few years and really kind of develop a project, rather than like, okay, here's 5 weeks to turn around something that needs to be really, you know, kind of tight and safe.
I feel like that's a really satisfying idea as a creative, is to be so involved in something. Not only is it less stress in a way in terms of time wise, just because you're actively developing it along with the game itself and the visuals, but it's also, I feel like, purely on a you know, personal level, you can take more ownership of it because you're a more integral part of the process, and it just feels like it's nice to be able to invest in something that you can continually work at and improve, as opposed to sort of just knocking out a score in 6 weeks and stressing out everything, getting it recorded, and then it's done and you never see it again. Whereas, you know, a long form project like that is really satisfying, and I think it's great for everyone to try every once in a while.
Is it fair to say as well that the music budget for one in games is a bit more reliable as well because of that sort of, there's not the same deadline pressure as there is in film, and the tightening of the screw.
Sorry?
Say again, Ali.
We should ask Kevin.
Yeah, I think this is a great, that's what I was about to say. I think this is a great topic to bring up with Kevin as well. You know, not to ask you to reveal specific budgets or so, but I think that you would kind of expect a range as well. You know, I'm sure there are things that are, you know, pretty much super tight turnaround and, you know, very small, limited. But then you get like AAA games that are, you know, you'll get 3 years to write something. And so I'm sure there's a range kind of all in between. But yeah, I mean, Kevin just wrote in there that it's sort of, for the most part, you get a longer kind of time frame to work on something. But yeah, I think that's
save
great.
it. Let's save it for our discussion with Kevin.
Yeah, and we'll save some more Ori chat, so Kevin, prepare yourself. We can nerd out over it.
I think we had another one Shane brought up that I think would be great to play, which is from an album by Christopher Tin. And Christopher Tin is someone who is, I believe, an RCM alum as well.
He is, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Did our same course in the late 90s.
Yeah. And he writes kind of for everything. You know, he writes for films, for games, his own concert music, puts out albums, and just really cool music. So I'm gonna kind of cue this up off of is it the album name Astronomy, or is that the name of the track?
No, that's one of the tracks from the album called To Shiver the Sky. Play from around 2 minutes, maybe.
Cool.
And just cut when you feel that it's enough.
Yeah, I'll just cue this up. Skip ads.
But yeah, what just while you're getting it ready, I was going to say what I think is really cool about this album is, even though it's like, in a way, it's concert music, but it's kind of film music adjacent, because he's known especially for video game music, like his piece Baba Yetu, which was the first Grammy-nominated piece of video game music, an amazing piece of music, and has been performed all over the world as well as concert music. But this album was funded largely through Kickstarter, which I think is a really cool thing that you can do if you have the capacity of lots of people knowing about you already. But he was able to kind of tailor the album towards the fans and things that they wanted through the stretch goals. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's like concert music and media music, because a lot of concert music is sometimes not written with the general public in mind, but this absolutely is.
Cool. All right, I'll play from about 2 minutes. I had to stop myself just because I could just keep listening. It's amazing writing.
That is absolutely not what I was expecting. It's like
we should all watch afterwards if you haven't seen it. The video he put up on YouTube, Christopher Tin did. He did like an animation of the score where he shows how he put different like constellations through the relationships of the instruments on the score. It's very cool additional layer.
Yeah. But it's, you know, I think what is so, you know, this is like a dream career to be able to kind of just work in all of these different facets of music. And I think that's, you know, really kind of one of the main points of tonight's discussion is that there is so much more beyond just going after these big studio films. And a project like this is so fulfilling for an artist, you know, to get to just do your own album and, you know, kind of have that interaction directly with your fans and, you know, have that kind of feedback and get to write, you know, pure, beautiful music. I think that's just such a fulfilling opportunity.
I think there's definitely something to be said for being, you know, that kind of a renaissance person, as it were, of music, like keeping it as varied as possible, because it's all going to feed into everything else that you do, both you know, creatively but also financially, because without his other stuff he might not have been able to fund this, you know, things like that. And so I think it's just really important, and it's not just he won't have fallen into being able to do everything. He'll have pursued everything, and so you know, there's a lesson there, I think, that you get out of it what you put in, and it doesn't have to be all in the same channel. You know, you can really keep it varied, keep it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you have to seek it out, you know. And I think that's also one of the best parts about it, is because I think from a lot of sort of students' perspectives too, and, you know, I definitely felt this way, like when I first moved to London, all I really knew was Hollywood film. And, you know, that's what I thought, okay, I'm going to do my course and eventually I'm going to become a big Hollywood composer. And I've learned so much more about what else is out there. And, you know, just how much more appealing a lot of these other different facets are. You know, I think really being, you know, finding your voice as an artist and then pursuing these things to, you know, go after different projects and network and do all the things that you're supposed to do, but also create your own projects, you know, kind of create your own opportunities. You know, some of our other friends who did our course with us, like our friend AJ, is doing a really cool project of a sort of that Shane's been working with him on. It's a sort of essentially a kind of radio play, and it's so well done. And, you know, I think there's just so many creative outlets that for you to pursue. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Just to add to that, Mike, I think, you know, one thing that I kind of learned, I guess, at exactly the same time as you, coming in and out of college, that I think for a lot of us in a similar position, that the big fear was not making it, whatever that meant. And actually what I've come to realize is there's a bigger fear on top of that. Sorry to be a sulky Sally, but what if you do make it and you don't like it? And you've put all your efforts into one very singular thing, which is Hollywood film. And then, like, you know, and you wouldn't be the first to make it as a Hollywood composer and actually realize it might not be that enjoyable to you. Surely it's better to kind of spread yourself across different versions of the craft and different things to you know.
Well, I think there's always a danger of assuming that once you reach a certain point, or once you reach that goal, everything's going to come up roses and everything's going to be happy. But take, for example, like what Jim Carrey said about being famous. Once he reached the top, he realized essentially how empty it was because he wasn't actually satisfied in what he was doing. It's like in the same ways, you know, like if you suddenly became a millionaire, I'm sure it would be thrilling for the first little bit, but then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I should be happy all the time. Why am I not happy? And I feel like in some ways that can factor into career choice as well, because if you expect, because you have this idealized version of what you think it's going to be, and if it's not that way, then you're sort of left with this empty hole just based on your own preconceived notions of how it isn't actually in reality. And so I guess it's always pursuing what's going to bring you joy and allow you to, obviously allow you to get by, but it's ultimately about artistic satisfaction in one way or another. And if doing a big Hollywood film is going to be the thing that does that for you, then go for it. But I don't think it's, all roads do not lead to that, and all roads shouldn't lead to that.
Yeah. It's keep doing what makes you happy while it's still making you happy.
Yeah,
well, I think Kevin brings up a good point too, which is like sometimes it takes that first success, of kind of seeing that goal in order to realize, actually, this isn't the thing that makes me happy. And I can definitely, attest to that too. I think, kind of getting involved in really big projects and stuff is really exciting and thrilling. But then once you've done it and you've sort of seen it and see how the machine works and everything, it's also sort of like, okay, actually, I'm not sure if that's what I want for me. And, I'd rather have a chance to do my own projects and be a little bit more malleable and that sort of thing. And, it's a total personal choice. I've also seen people who completely thrive in it. Mm-hmm. And like, it is for them. It is the thing that they want to do. But I think it's just worth exploring and, pursuing all these different avenues. That's the only way you're going to find out.
Bit of a platitude, but maybe the journey is the destination.
Live, love, laugh.
Lovely.
Well, I think that is a great place to end.
If I may rephrase, isn't the journey towards the destination itself?
That's what Shane said.
That's kind of what I said.
What a poacher! What a phrase poacher! Disgusting.
If I can just plug next week. So next week we're going to do another review of submissions. So if anyone wants to, next week's topic is kind of big hybrid scores. So if you've got sort of big electronic and orchestral, whatever epic scores, and you want to share your work, we would love to review it. So that's going to be pretty much the most of the stream. And, so I hope to
not maybe so much review like we're on high judging it, but more let's chat about it and show it to people.
Yeah, good distinction. So yeah, if you've got some music you'd love to share with us, we would love to hear it. And, and kind of, I think, gear the discussion towards like what makes something, sound sort of epic and also kind of interesting production techniques of how do you combine these things. So look forward to that. Any other thoughts, guys?
No.
Cool.
Good night, everyone. That's my last thought.
Cool. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, this was great.
This was really led into some interesting places. So cool. Thanks everyone for all your submissions tonight and for the chat. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you next week, hopefully.
And make sure to go play Ori and the Blind Forest.
Yes. And listen to Christopher Tin's music as well.
Watch the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's a lot of things to do.
You don't have enough time before next week.
Yeah.
And possibly subscribe to our channel too, because
yeah, please do.
Cool. Thanks
All right,
everyone.
Goodbye everyone.